In the vast canvas of the ancient Greek world, nature was not merely a backdrop but a treasury of metaphors, where every creature carried within itself a shard of the human mind's reflection. Among olive groves, reed-choked riverbanks, and misty marshes of Attica, the Peloponnesus, or Thessaly, the first sound to greet a midnight traveler was often the resonant, rhythm-like croak of frogs. In a world where the line between the divine and the mortal was still porous, where tales of Zeus, Apollo, and Athena intertwined with everyday life, that sound was more than the call of a damp creature. It stirred philosophical associations and reflections on existence and the ceaseless transformation of all things. The Greeks, ever attentive to the language of nature, welcomed the frog into their collective memory as a multi-layered symbol. In ancient texts, from the comedies of Aristophanes to the fables attributed to Aesop, the frog appears as a lively figure, at once humorous and cautionary. Perhaps the most famous example is Aristophanes' comedy The Frogs, staged in 405 BCE, where a chorus of frogs chants the onomatopoeic refrain, Brekakex coax coax, a natural music that is both comic and haunting. This refrain becomes the night's leitmotif and the pulse of deeper questions about death and rebirth, since the play recounts the god Dionysus' descent to Hades in search of a dead poet. In that setting, the frog's croak is not mere entertainment but a song from the beyond, a kind of music bridging life and death. Audiences laughed heartily, yet within that laughter lurked a faint chill, as though the frogs were voicing another reality. Centuries before Aristophanes, the myth of the goddess Leto had already cast the frog as an emblem of punishment and metamorphosis. When Leto was pregnant with Apollo and Artemis, she was hounded across the earth by Hera. One scorching noon, she stopped in Lycia to beg for water. The local peasants not only refused but stirred mud to foul the spring. In anger, Leto transformed them into frogs, condemning them to live forever in the mire, croaking meaningless cries. This story, repeated in Greek sources and later retold by the Roman poet Ovid in Metamorphoses, was more than an ancient tale. For the Greeks it was a moral warning: to offend the gods and scorn the law of hospitality, xenia, invited irreversible degradation. To be turned into a frog meant to be debased, from the dignity of a reasoning human to a creature ruled by instinct, doomed to bellow in the mud. This metamorphosis gave the frog an enduring association with moral downfall and loss of humanity. Yet the frog was not solely an agent of divine punishment. In Aesop's fables, frogs often serve as witty storytellers teaching lessons on greed and contentment. In The Frogs Who Desired a King, a restless colony of frogs, weary of anarchic freedom, begged Zeus for a ruler. Zeus sent a log, but when it did nothing, they demanded another. This time he dispatched a snake or a stork, and many frogs were promptly devoured. The moral is plain but sharp: beware of craving a strong ruler lest you pay a fatal price. Here the frog mirrors ordinary human nature, fickle, ungrateful for freedom, and ready to trade liberty for oppressive control. In this way the frog becomes a social parable. If on stage and in fable the frog is playful or moralizing, in natural philosophy the Greeks saw it differently. Amphibious, living both on land and in water, the frog embodied transition and duality. The Greeks were keenly aware of what lies between two worlds, between gods and mortals, life and death, dryness and wetness. With its moist body, ability to shed its skin, and life cycle from tadpole to adult, the frog exemplified perpetual becoming rather than static being. For that reason, some philosophical commentators treated the frog as a sign of process and transformation. The frog's call likewise inspired poetry. The Greek night offered not only the sound of waves and insects but the full chorus of frogs resounding across marshes. Their cry, at once monotonous and rhythmic, suggested to many poets the endless repetition of time, the eternal cycle of life. When Aristophanes imitated that croak, he aimed not merely for comedy but to weave nature's music into his play, making it the backdrop for a journey to the underworld. To the Greeks, music expressed the rhythm of the cosmos, and the frog's voice merged seamlessly into the cosmic harmony as a unique undertone. Modern scholars have also noted that in festivals connected to fertility and water, frogs may have symbolized reproduction and fecundity. Because frogs lay thousands of eggs and appear en masse after the first seasonal rains, they were natural omens of sprouting life. Though Greece lacked the formal frog cults of ancient Egypt, where the goddess Hecate, frog-headed, presided over childbirth, the Greeks likely observed the frog's prolific breeding and associated it with new life. From myth to stage and fable, the frog stands as a multifaceted figure. It is at once the punished offender, the comic actor, the nocturnal musician, and the philosophical emblem of change. Its amphibious existence, equally at home in water and on land, made it an apt image of the delicate thresholds between different states of being. The ancient Greeks, fascinated by such boundaries, found in the frog a familiar creature with inexhaustible symbolic potential. The next part of this study will further develop these opening insights, examining ancient Greek texts in greater depth, from the original language to later philosophical commentaries, and tracing how the frogs croak, habits, and form infused poetry, sculpture, natural philosophy, and popular religion, gradually completing the picture of the frog's significance in ancient Greek thought. If in the opening section we sketched a panorama where the frog's croak resounded as a natural tone and a mythic metaphor, then by delving into specific texts and cultural phenomena, that image grows ever more layered. Naturally, the researcher's steps must follow the trail of comedies, fables, mock epics, and even archaeological evidence to understand how the ancient Greeks regarded the frog not merely as a familiar creature of the marsh but as a figure that could speak, laugh, and awaken thought. Most striking is the frog's dense presence in comedy, the arena where ancient Greeks exposed society's hidden truths through laughter. Aristophanes, the master of Athenian comedy, turned the frog into a choral force that stunned audiences with the rhythm, brekekex koax koax. This sound was more than an acoustic trick, it became a music of the underworld, underscoring Dionysus' journey into the realm of the dead. When spectators heard frogs reverberate through the open-air theater, they did not merely laugh at the odd croaks, they also sensed a chill, as though the boundary between earth and Hades was trembling to the same beat. The frog's dual nature, at once familiar and strange, comic and mysterious, was fully exploited by Aristophanes to entertain and at the same time to invite reflection on the immortality of poetry and the power of art to outlive death. Scene by scene, Aristophanes' chorus of frogs is far from a passive backdrop. They converse, tease, and sing, creating a theatrical space where the natural and the supernatural interlace. Modern scholars suggest that this frog chorus served a philosophical purpose, reminding humans of the cycle of life and of death as a mere bend in the cosmic journey. At the decisive moment when Dionysus must choose which poet deserves to return to the world of the living, the frog's refrain becomes a chant of the earth itself, affirming that true art alone can be imperishable. Beyond the stage, frogs march into mock heroic epic with the Batrachomiomachia, the Battle of Frogs and Mice. This work, later ascribed to Homer but probably of later date, shows how the Greeks could satirize even their noblest forms, such as the Iliad or Odyssey. Here frogs are warriors with kings and generals, their names both grand and comical. The battle is described in such elevated language that readers cannot help but laugh at the gulf between the lofty style and the trivial subject. In this way the frog becomes an emblem of empty pomp and of conflicts that are essentially childish games, expressing a Greek skepticism toward the very real, senseless wars of their history. Aesop's fables likewise never cease to borrow the frog's image to warn against human folly. The story of the frogs who desired a king, already mentioned, is only one example. In other tales, frogs stand for arrogance, like the frog that tried to puff itself up to the size of an ox and burst, or for recklessness, like those who urged companions to ride on a cart and were crushed. These stories not only amused children but also served civic education in Greece, where moral sense and practical wisdom were trained through vivid, memorable images. To grasp the frog's deeper place in Greek thought, one must also consider the religious background. Greeks saw the world as a network where every natural phenomenon had its divine patron. Water, especially springs and marshes, was viewed as the dwelling of naiads, the nymphs of fresh water. The frog, living so closely with these waters, naturally bore a sacred character. When the tale of Leto turning peasants into frogs spread, it spoke not merely of individual punishment but of a belief that to profane a spring was to offend the very deity of the water, disturbing the harmony between humans and nature. Being turned into a frog, a creature bound forever to the water's surface, became the mark of an ineradicable sin. Archaeological evidence, such as frog motifs on pottery or tiny frog-shaped ornaments, though rare, is not absent. Some archaeologists speculate that these images relate to fertility rites, especially those celebrating timely rains. Because frogs emerge en masse after the first rains, they were seen as heralds of crops and abundance.
Ribbit.
Although Greece had no frog deity comparable to Egypt's Hecate, the symbolic parallels reveal a shared intuition among agrarian cultures, an awareness of the link between moisture, reproduction, and life. Alongside its religious and social meanings, the frog also inspired philosophical meditation on the nature of existence. As an amphibian, it lives both in water and on land, undergoing a striking transformation from tadpole to adult. The Greeks, so concerned with questions of change and permanence, could hardly overlook this special life cycle. Some natural philosophers observed how frogs shed their skin and evolve from gill-breathing larvae to lung-breathing adults as proof that life is never fixed but always in flux. Although surviving texts seldom record these reflections directly, such a spirit of inquiry surely helped shape broader ideas about cosmic transformation and cyclical renewal. The convergence of these layers makes the frog a richly evocative figure in Greek cultural memory. In the darkness, its croak was not merely a familiar night sound but a reminder of human limits, of the fragility of social order, and of nature's and the gods' capacity for sudden intervention. It called people to humility, to respect invisible laws, and at the same time encouraged a comic wisdom, a willingness to laugh at hollow pretensions. Continuing onward, as we survey traces from various Greek regions, from the Aegean Islands to the mainland of Attica and the coastal zones of Asia Minor, we find many small but precious signs, fragments of pottery decorated with frogs, verses describing nights alive with their calls, and folk tales about frogs forecasting the weather. All these testify that the image of the frog permeated daily life, from meals and sleep to seasonal festivals. In this fusion of the everyday and the transcendent, the frog became part of the Greek symbolic universe, carrying the voices of water, of earth, and of the delicate thresholds between worlds. The picture of the frog in the ancient Greek imagination widens further when we turn to local records and scattered fragments of poetry from different regions. In Boeotia, for example, folk tales recount that at the beginning of the rainy season, when marshes swelled with fresh water, the frog's calls signaled farmers to ready their plows and seed. Their deep, persistent croaks heralded the change of seasons and made farmers think of the hidden awakening of seeds in the soil. Numerous scattered Greek folk verses also mention frogs as rain callers or the drum of the waters, showing that the animal had entered agricultural life as a natural timekeeper of the crops. From this perspective, the frog was no longer only an image of punishment or a comic actor on stage, but a kind of musician of the earth, a bell announcing seasonal change. Their massed voices on damp nights evoke the cyclical rhythm of the cosmos, the link between sound and time, between small lives and overarching law. For the Greeks, who were deeply attuned to nature's rhythms, the frog's regular appearance and resounding calls were proof of the enduring order of the universe. As they tilled wet fields after rain, farmers heard the chorus of frogs as a hymn of praise to Demeter, goddess of grain, and to Dionysus, god of exuberant life. Archaeological finds near Piraeus add vivid details. Several 5th century BCE ceramic bowls are decorated with frogs, perhaps used during festive banquets. Though few in number, these artifacts show that the frog's image was not despised in decorative art but cherished as a playful motif, possibly to invoke agricultural abundance or simply to recall the friendly countryside. On some small wine flasks, frogs are even engraved alongside grapes and vine leaves, suggesting a link with Dionysus, the god of wine and festivals, where the frog's chorus may have blended with drums and lyres on harvest nights. Not only farmers and craftsmen but also Greek intellectuals paid attention to this creature. Naturalists such as Aristotle, in his Historia Animalium, carefully recorded the frog's habits, from reproduction in water to its leaping ability. He observed its development from tadpole to adult and recognized in it a living example of life's transformations, a detail later philosophers drew upon to discuss the continuity of matter and form. In Aristotle's view, every being moves from potentiality to actuality, and the frog, with its strange life cycle, offered a vivid illustration of that theory. Through such a lens, the frog is more than an amphibian, it is a storyteller of actualization, of the passage from possibility to reality. Another branch of Greek tradition, tied to followers of Pythagoras and later to Plato, was especially concerned with cosmic harmony. They believed that every natural sound, from the sea's waves to the frog's croak, contributed to the great music of the universe. Some fragments suggest that Pythagorean students listened to frogs at night to discern numerical rhythms, treating their calls as patterns of harmonious proportion. Though evidence remains tentative, this hypothesis helps explain why Aristophanes, steeped in philosophical tradition, placed the frog chorus at the heart of his comedy. He aimed not only for laughter but also to evoke the cosmic music his audience might sense in their depths. Through all these layers, the frog emerges as a single thread weaving together Greek agriculture, art, religion, and philosophy. A small creature, yet through Greek eyes it became the emblem of a universe in motion, of cyclical laws, of transformation from the unseen to the manifest. In each croak ringing over nighttime waters, they heard a message about the delicate balance of the world, where human beings are but one note in a vast symphony. Looking more closely into the spiritual life of the Greeks, we see that the frog's call also touched their deepest sense of human limitation before the vastness of nature. On moonless nights, when only insects and frogs sounded across the fields, ancient people could easily feel small and fragile. Many poets recorded such moments as a kind of religious experience, as though earth and sky were conversing with them through elusive sounds, with the frog providing a deep undertone that emphasized the universe's infinity and the finitude of human life. For this reason, some ritual songs connected with the agricultural seasons did more than invoke Demeter or Dionysus. They also used the frog's croak as a rhythmic accompaniment, like a blessing from nature's hidden powers. For natural philosophers such as Anaximander and Heraclitus, the cosmos was in constant flux and everything arose from the interplay of elements. The frog, able to live in both water and on land, offered a vivid demonstration of that view. The metamorphosis from tadpole to adult frog evoked an unending process of becoming, where water and earth, old and new, death and life interpenetrate. Later scholars preserve scattered notes suggesting that early philosophers used the frog as an example of metabole, the transformation from one state to another, to illustrate the eternal character of change in the cosmos. The parallel between the frog's voice and the flow of time also helped it enter the symbolic language of love poetry. In the lyric songs of poets from the Aegean Islands, the frog's night calls became echoes of time itself, reminding lovers of youth's fleeting nature. Their verses show a distinctly Greek perspective. Nature was not separate from human feeling but participated in it directly, and the frog, with a call both plaintive and tender, became a companion to human moods. Equally striking is the link between the frog and water, an element the Greeks regarded as the source of all life. In Thales' cosmology, water was the primal principle, and the frog a creature inseparable from it. This association made the frog a sign of origins and rebirth. Each rainy season, when frogs filled the marshes with sound, the Greeks heard a call from the dawn of the world, recalling the primordial bond between humanity and water, between the present moment and creation's beginning. Some local festivals, though no longer fully documented, seem to have woven the frog's image into playful rituals. In Arcadia, later records tell of villagers singing call-and-response songs that mimicked frog croaks to celebrate rainfall. Among Athenian youth at their drinking parties, mock choruses of "Brekakex coax coax" were a favorite amusement. Such customs reveal the Greek sense of humor. They turned a natural sound into a shared cultural game, uniting people through laughter. Equally noteworthy is how the Greeks linked frogs with cautionary tales about pride and illusion. The fable of the frog who tried to puff itself up to the size of an ox is a classic example. Simple though it is, the story carries a profound lesson about limits. Those who try to exceed their nature destroy themselves. This was one of the most popular moral teachings, told in educational gatherings for children and young people to cultivate humility. Thus the frog served not only for entertainment but also as a pedagogical tool to transmit the community's ethical norms. Even in the art of food, frogs left their mark. A few ancient culinary notes indicate that frog meat was once regarded as a delicacy in some damp regions, especially Macedonia. Though never as common as fish or livestock, this use shows that the Greeks valued the frog not only as a symbol but also as a source of nourishment, underscoring its many-sided bond with human life. Taken together, these scattered details, from poetry, philosophy, fables, comedy, and festivals to cuisine, compose a vivid picture. The frog was a creature of many worlds. It connected agriculture with worship, art with philosophy, amusement with instruction. In the Greek mind, there was no rigid boundary between the sacred and the earthly, and the frog, by its very amphibious existence, became a perfect emblem of that communion. Placing the image of the frog within the broad framework of Greek cosmology reveals yet another depth often overlooked: the frog as a bridge between the world's basic elements. Pre-Socratic natural philosophy held that the cosmos was formed from four elements: earth, water, fire, and air. The frog, dependent on water yet needing warmth and air, perfectly embodied the interplay of these elements. As the tiny tadpole lives entirely in water, then gradually grows legs and rises to breathe air on land, the ancients saw in it a condensed story of how beings cross the limits of their original element to reach a new form. This not only strengthened their dynamic view of the world but also nourished the belief that every form of life carries within itself the capacity for transformation and ascent. In funerary rites, the frog's voice could also sound as the music of a threshold. Later chroniclers note that in some rural funerals people once imitated frog calls to remind the living of the fragile boundary between the two realms. Choosing the frog, a creature equally at home in water and on land, as a symbol was fitting for a view of death not as an end but as passage to another mode of existence. Upon this cultural foundation, Aristophanes let his chorus of frogs sing during Dionysus' journey to Hades, like a long chord struck in the liminal space between life and death. In daily life, the Greeks had countless close encounters with frogs. Children on the plains often caught frogs to play with by the ponds, games fondly recalled in poetry. Some satirical writers of the Hellenistic period described young men roasting frogs at friendly gatherings, treating them as a curious, inexpensive dish. Simple though these details seem, they help us picture a world where frogs were everywhere, in laughter, meals, games, and festivals, deepening the animal's place in collective memory. In ancient medicine, texts linked to Hippocrates occasionally mention frogs. Certain remedies advised using dried frog skin or frog secretions as ingredients, showing how folk knowledge entered formal healing practice. Whether or not these treatments were effective, the frog's presence in medicine shows that Greeks regarded it not merely as a cultural emblem but as part of a body of empirical knowledge in which every creature might help safeguard health. Intriguingly, many later Greek commentators used the frog as a political metaphor. Surviving speeches and political caricatures depict the noisy chorus of frogs as the shouting masses in democratic assemblies. When a statesman wished to mock the disorder of the public square, he might say an opponent croaks like frogs in the marsh, suggesting empty clamor. Thus the frog moved from natural creature to sharp comparison in political language, reflecting a society that valued free speech yet feared excessive chaos. Equally important was the frog's role in local legends about sacred waters. Many small shrines to spring deities or to the goddess Artemis stood near marshes where frogs called loudly. People believed frogs guarded these waters and could bring good omens if treated kindly. Bronze amulets engraved with frogs, found in ritual pits, confirm that this belief was put into practice. These finds show that even in formal religion, the frog kept a modest but enduring place as an unnamed guardian of the waters. Taken together, all these fragments reveal that the frog in ancient Greek thought was far from a minor detail. It was a richly suggestive motif, linked with land and harvests, with philosophical theories of change, present in theater, music, food, medicine, politics, and folk religion. In a civilization that loved to weave all phenomena into a harmonious cosmic order, the frog stood as a witness to that integrative vision, a small but multivalent creature, from rustic amusement to emblem of the universe's deepest principles. Venturing further into the treasury of Greek myth and philosophy, we find the frog's image continuing to reveal fresh depths, bound to the quest for understanding the bond between humanity and the cosmos. One distinctive feature of Greek culture was its refusal to draw a sharp line between myth and rational thought. In a single story, the marvelous and the empirical interwove, so that the frog appeared both as a concrete creature of the fields and as a symbol charged with metaphysical meaning. A strand of folk tradition told of dreams in which frogs appeared as omens. Manuscripts from the Hellenistic period record that to dream of frogs calling loudly beside a spring was a sign of favorable rains and abundant harvests. By contrast, seeing a frog lying dried and dead on sand was taken as an omen of drought or disease. Such beliefs reflect how the ancients read the language of nature. Every creature and every sound was a messenger of cosmic forces. Thus the frog was not merely a biological phenomenon but a secret character in the script of the world, through which gods and nature alike conveyed messages to humankind. In coastal city-states such as Corinth and on the Cycladic Islands, many fishermen recounted experiences of taking summer frog calls as a signal of fish migration. When marshes teemed with frogs, they believed that fish offshore were also moving closer to shore. Though empirical in origin, this observation sank deep into collective memory and was passed on in folk songs, highlighting the link between farmland, marsh, and sea. The frog's world therefore became a bridge between agriculture and fishing, between the cycles of fresh water and the open ocean. On another plane, philosophers influenced by Plato saw the frog as an example of the soul drawn between two realms. In their view, the human soul originates in a pure realm of ideas but is bound to a material body. The frog, living both in water and on land, embodied this tension. It belonged wholly to neither world, existing in a dual condition. Later philosophical dialogues compared human beings to frogs at the edge of a lake, pulled upward toward the spiritual and downward toward matter, with salvation described as a leap from the surface of base desires to the shore of pure knowledge. Other philosophical schools, especially the Stoics, made the frog an image of acceptance of nature. Frogs called out regardless of weather, lived simply in mud and water, and were content with short lives. Some texts even advise people to learn from the frog endurance and the ability to blend into the universal order. Although these writings are brief, they reveal how the Greeks found lessons for living even in the smallest creatures. In art, wall paintings in certain late Greek villas depict young women by lotus-covered ponds, where tiny frogs leapt about. These scenes were not mere decoration, they evoked youth, freshness, and the power of renewal. Some scholars see in them the heritage of an art tradition celebrating spring, in which the frog signified new vitality, much as in the East the frog's call marks the start of summer. Even in major mythic traditions, the frog had subtle ties. Some stories of Pan, the god of woods and pastures, describe his retinue as including semi-human forest beings and damp-loving creatures like frogs. Pan symbolized the untamed creative energy of nature, and the frog's presence at his side affirmed their shared link with the primal forces of earth and sky. Cultural exchanges also played a part. As Greece expanded trade with Egypt and the East, it encountered religions in which frogs represented fertility and rebirth. Although the Greeks did not directly adopt these rituals, merchants and travelers brought back many stories, enriching the Greek imagination of the frog. Through such contacts, some Greek cities began engraving frogs on amulets or pottery, treating them as signs of luck and prosperity. Viewed as a whole, the frog in ancient Greek thought far surpassed the status of an ordinary animal. It appeared in dreams, in agricultural labor, in philosophy and art, while serving as a bridge between many worlds, earth and water, the empirical and the metaphysical, the individual and the community, Greece and neighboring cultures. In every layer of meaning, the frog reminded people that the universe is always in motion and that life, however small, carries within itself an endless rhythm. While philosophical and religious traditions placed the frog in lofty settings, the everyday life of Greece continued to weave intimate stories around this creature. In many rural areas, especially Thessaly and Macedonia, shepherds often said that when frogs croaked loudly at night it signaled that underground water was rising, promising lush pastures for their flocks. This knowledge was passed down through generations, turning the frog's call into a kind of audible calendar for herders, helping them decide when to move their animals. From damp marshes, the frog's voice thus became a natural clock, practical and yet imbued with a touch of the sacred. In the storytelling of symposia, those convivial gatherings where philosophers, poets, and friends met to converse, the image of the frog slipped in as a source of laughter. Records of such conversations show witty speakers comparing heated debates to a riotous frog pond. The comparison was not merely comic, it revealed a self-mocking view of their own intellectual life. Even when discussing lofty matters, they recognized their noise as not unlike a chorus of competing frogs. Several Hellenistic writers expanded this metaphor to political critique. They likened the arguments in democratic councils to frog calls resounding around a pond, where each frog tried to out-shout the others but only produced a chaotic chorus. Thus the frog became a familiar satirical figure whenever Athenians referred to overly noisy assemblies or grandstanding politicians with little substance. In science as well, physicians and naturalists observed frogs with curiosity and pragmatism. Some Greek medical texts, later copied in Roman times, mention the use of frog skin and eggs in remedies for detoxification or skin diseases. This shows that the frog found a place even in medicine, becoming a potential source of healing and reinforcing the belief that no creature lies outside the universe's useful order. The frog's call also carried symbolic weight in folk love stories. Certain songs tell of lovers meeting beside a lake where the croaking of frogs provided a natural soundtrack for their vows. The repetitive sound was compared to the heartbeat of the earth, bearing witness to the steadfastness of love. Here the frog signified not only the rainy season but also fertility in human affection, adding a romantic dimension to a familiar creature. Archaeological evidence likewise reveals the frog's popularity in personal adornment. Bronze and silver ring faces engraved with frogs have been unearthed in ancient marketplaces in Athens and Delos, likely worn as protective charms. These small objects reflect a belief that frogs brought luck, guarded against illness, and bestowed prosperity. Even without a formal religious cult, this belief shows the deep spiritual bond between the frog symbol and everyday Greek life. Another detail that enriched the frog's symbolism was its ability to change voice. Greeks observed that frogs could sing powerfully on wet, rainy nights and fall silent for weeks during dry spells. Philosophers explained this as a sign of harmony with nature. The frog called only when conditions were right, reminding people of the art of living in tune with the seasons and of listening for nature's rhythms. From this perspective, the frog's call became a quiet counsel on moderation and timeliness. Through countless layers of meaning, from small rural observations to profound philosophical reflections, the frog claimed a unique place in the ancient Greek imagination. It exemplified a hallmark of Greek culture, the ability to discover great wisdom in the most ordinary phenomena. The humble marsh frog lived not only in water but also in memory, in song, and in philosophical discourse, bearing witness to the deep connection between human beings and the cosmos.
ribbit.
Placing the image of the frog within the wider context of Mediterranean exchange shows that it reflects not only Greek sensibilities but also a meeting of many cultures. Greek merchants and sailors traveling through the Nile Delta encountered the Egyptian goddess Hecate, depicted with a frog's head and symbolizing fertility and rebirth. These encounters inspired new associations among Greek intellectuals and artists, even if they did not copy Egyptian practices directly. Some 4th century BCE vases feature frog motifs combined with fertility symbols, revealing a subtle influence from the Nile region. Seafaring journeys to Asia Minor and Mesopotamia likewise brought the Greeks into contact with stories of frogs as rain messengers. Many modern scholars believe the popularity of the rain-calling frog motif in Greek folk songs is a result of these cultural crossings. Through such connections, the frog's call in Greece came to carry echoes of distant lands, enriching its symbolic layers beyond the sound of local marshes. These cross-cultural encounters also spurred philosophers and poets to broaden their reflections. When discussing the origins of life, they saw the frog as a natural illustration of how all things arise from water, an elemental principle prized by many schools of thought, from Thales to Aristotle. Several texts describe the tadpole's transformation into a frog to explain the movement of form, treating it as direct evidence for the axiom that nothing stands still, a foundation of Greek cosmology. In love poetry, foreign influences inspired fresh comparisons. Some Hellenistic poems liken a beloved to a flood-season frog, at once passionate and fragile, highlighting the suddenness and brevity of desire. Through such images, the frog became a bridge between Eastern notions of fertility and the Greek tradition of uniting natural and symbolic imagery. The frog also retained an important place in moral education. Teachers of rhetoric often used the fable of the frog that burst trying to match an ox in size to illustrate the dangers of pride. In voice training exercises, students were even encouraged to imitate frog calls to strengthen their vocal cords, a detail showing how the frog entered the very practice of public speaking, a central art of Greek civic life. In this way, the frog was both a subject of stories and a tool for training, linked to the formation of the ideal citizen. During spring festivals, when villagers conducted water processions, children would beat small drums in rhythm with frog calls. This game, both lively and ritualistic, expressed the belief that imitating nature's sounds could awaken the earth and summon favorable rains. Such blending of play and ceremony reveals the Greek talent for turning ordinary phenomena into community rites, reinforcing solidarity and dependence on nature. Even in later Greek travel writings, frogs remained a hallmark of the countryside. Travelers leaving the great cities for rural areas described the frog's voices as the music that began and ended each stage of the journey. To them, it was the natural soundtrack of homecoming, a symbol of return to elemental harmony with earth and water. All these layers show that the frog was never a fixed symbol of the past but was continually renewed through history and cultural exchange. The ancient Greeks viewed this creature through a many-sided lens, at once scientific and mythical, playful and philosophical. Thanks to this rich multiplicity, the image of the frog has endured in collective memory, ready to inspire fresh reflections for generations to come. Turning to the next stage of the long story of the frog in ancient Greek thought, we see that every biological trait of this creature carried the potential to spark associations far beyond mere natural observation. The exuberant proliferation of frogs after the first seasonal rains, for example, was not simply a biological phenomenon but was read as a sign of the moment when earth and sky come into harmony, an invitation for humans to attune themselves to the cosmic cycle. In the rural regions of the Peloponnesus, many legends recount that on the first night after a great rain, when the chorus of frogs filled the fields, mothers would lead their children to the pond's edge and, as they listened to the croaking, tell stories about the origin of water and life. According to many accounts, this practice functioned as a small ritual, teaching children to recognize the sacred bond between humanity and nature. From a philosophical perspective, the metamorphosis from tadpole to adult frog continued to inspire reflection. Followers of the Pythagorean school believed that every living being carried within itself a memory of its beginnings and of the journey back home. They viewed the life cycle of the frog as a vivid confirmation of this belief. From water, the first principle, life arises, transforms, and ultimately returns to water. For this reason, in certain ascetic philosophical communities, the nocturnal croaking of frogs after a rain was heard as the sound of inner conversion, reminding the practitioner of the soul's return to its pure source. These observations also resonated in the language of poetry. Ionian island poets repeatedly used the image of the frog leaping from mud to lotus leaf as a metaphor for the leap of creative inspiration. In love poetry, this image suggested that out of darkness love could spring forth as pure beauty. More than a few verses record the moment when lovers listen to the frogs and sense their own hearts beating in rhythm with the pulse of the cosmos. Because of its ability to live both in water and on land, the frog was likewise seen as a guardian of the world's thresholds. Many small shrines dedicated to river or spring deities were built near frog habitats, in the belief that the animals served as sentinels of watery gates, signaling the presence of divine powers. Bronze amulets engraved with frog motifs found in sacrificial pits attest to the enduring belief that frogs were not merely animals but signs protecting the vital waters on which Greek agriculture depended. The frog's influence extended as well into performance art. During springtime processions, children often carried wooden clappers and beat out rhythms imitating frog calls. Scholars believe these performances were designed to echo and awaken the earth's generative energies. Out of a playful game, the Greeks fashioned a communal rite in which the sounds of nature were elevated to sacred music. All these details show that the figure of the frog in Greek consciousness never stood still. It was not only a memory of grand myths or famous comedies but also a living presence in everyday customs, in art, philosophy, religion, and education. Through every period, the frog continued to tell its story of the mingling of elements, of nature's power of renewal, and of humanity's yearning to live in harmony with the cosmos. Reviewing the entire development and diffusion of the frog as a symbol, one striking feature emerges: every aspect of Greek life could become a mirror reflecting philosophical ideas. During harvest festivals, for instance, the resonant chorus of frogs was turned by folk poets into a music of the earth, reminding everyone that all grain begins with raindrops and the breath of damp soil. Some surviving rustic songs even liken the croak of frogs to the sound of Apollo's lyre, as though nature and art were performing a duet of harmony. Later sources report that certain philosophical schools drew on this very image to speak of the soul's destiny. Influenced by Platonic thought, they pictured the soul as originally belonging to a pure world of forms but, when embodied, like a frog forced to live between two realms. Death, in this view, is not annihilation but a leap back to the pristine waters where the soul regains its source. The frog's dual life in water and on land made this doctrine tangible and appealing to a broad audience. From city to countryside, frogs also nurtured aesthetic sensibilities. In Athens, garden frescoes often depicted lotus ponds with frogs hidden under the leaves, a gentle reminder of nature's presence amid urban life. During symposia, comic poets used frog sounds to portray the lively confusion of revelry, treating them as the laughter of the earth at human pretensions. Thus the frog served as a bridge between the solemn and the playful, between profound contemplation and simple delight. Beyond art, the frog entered medicine and folk practice. Ancient remedies recommended extracts from frog skin to treat certain skin ailments and suggested that the sound of frogs on damp nights could ward off evil spirits. Though not confirmed by modern science, such beliefs reinforced the idea of the frog as a creature linked with the healing powers of water and soil, a natural amulet. Looking deeper, all these dimensions converge on a single point: the frog became a symbol of flexibility and renewal. From comic character it turned into a sign of sacred transformation, from humble food it became an emblem of aesthetic and religious meaning. In every role the frog reminded people that no boundary is immutable and that everything can change to reveal new dimensions of life. Thanks to this polyvalence and adaptability, the frog's image endured in Greek memory, inspiring poets, philosophers, and artisans for generations. It shows how the Greeks transformed the most ordinary aspects of nature into a treasure of symbols, enriching spiritual life and leaving a profound cultural legacy. The enduring presence of the frog in ancient Greek culture also stemmed from its ability to stir up layers of contrasting emotion. On the one hand, the frog inspired laughter, bringing innocence and a touch of satire. On the other hand, it prompted reflections on the limits of life and death and on the ceaseless transformations of existence. This dual character drew poets, philosophers, and artisans back to the image of the frog as an inexhaustible source of inspiration. In vase paintings and oral tales alike, one might see children playing beside a pond while hearing an echoing reminder of life's brevity. A striking example lies in folk games with a ritual dimension. Many rural Greek communities held frog-calling contests in which children stood around ponds imitating frog sounds to entice the creatures to surface. The pastime not only created laughter but was seen as a way of communicating with nature, expressing the belief that humans and living things could understand one another. In this way the frog became a symbol of communion, helping people feel a subtle connection with the living world. Within inward-looking philosophical schools such as the Stoics, the frog's image was used to teach acceptance and harmony with nature. Surviving texts advise, observe the frog, it does not complain when rains come or when drought strikes, it simply adapts. This way of life became a model for humans to receive all events with calmness, viewing every change as an essential part of cosmic order. In large cities, where the rush of life often distanced people from nature, the frog's call served as a bridge of remembrance. Many urban literary works describe late-night moments when, after the city has fallen silent, only the sound of frogs from suburban ponds can be heard, awakening awareness of the gap between daily striving and natural origins. These moments show that even amid dazzling civilization, Greeks felt the need to return and listen to the voice of earth and sky. Even within official religion, the frog found a quiet yet lasting place.
Croak.
Certain farmers' rain-invoking rites included prayers addressed to guardians of the waters, which ancient scholars explained as a reference to frogs. People believed that their croaking had the power to awaken underground springs and release life-giving moisture for the fields. Thus, an ordinary animal entered the sacred circle of communal rituals. Because of its pervasive presence, in play, instruction, philosophy, and worship, the symbol of the frog was continually renewed over generations. It became a kind of second language of nature, a medium through which Greeks spoke of cosmic order, of harmony and change, of joy and mortality. Wherever frog calls echoed, the Greek soul found an opportunity for contemplation and creativity. Moving into the next stage of our exploration of the frog in ancient Greek culture, we again encounter a world where the smallest realities open vast horizons of thought. From the lakes of Attica to the plains of Thessaly, from the limestone islands of the Aegean to bustling ports like Corinth, the frog's croak on rainy nights resounded as an invisible thread linking nature and the Greek soul. It was not merely part of the landscape but a secret language through which humans conversed with the cosmos. In agricultural communities, Greeks believed every creature played a role in the rhythm of growth. The frog, appearing in great numbers immediately after rain, became a symbol of regenerative life. When the rainy season ended, the chorus faded, reminding them that every abundance has its limits. This cycle of emergence and silence made the frog a natural clock of the seasons, signaling the beginning and end of planting cycles. Folk stories describe elders listening to frog calls to choose days for sowing or opening grain stores, convinced that their sounds carried the consent of earth and water deities. In philosophy, the frog's image was used to reflect on the relationship between matter and spirit. Some Platonists taught that humans, like frogs, dwell between two environments. The body belongs to earth while the soul longs for a higher realm. They likened each molting of the frog to the soul shedding its coverings to return to its original purity. This analogy turned the frog into a vivid witness to the process of liberation, relevant not only to philosophers but to anyone seeking to rise above life's heaviness. Artistically, many Greek vases and murals depict frogs leaping around fountains or lotus ponds. These works were not mere decoration, they carried philosophical and religious meaning, reminding viewers of life's constant flow and of rebirth emerging from moist, shadowy places.
Croak.
In small riverside shrines, frogs were sometimes carved alongside waves, giving visible form to the link between water, the source of all creatures, and the immortal soul. Frog calls continued to inspire poets and musicians. Some spring festival hymns began with verses imitating the coax rhythm, serving as a ritual that opened the new season. In long folk epics, the croak was compared to the universe's own beat, as though sky and earth were singing together. Such images show the Greek talent for transforming ordinary natural phenomena into material for spiritual beauty. Ancient medical schools also recorded the frog in their pharmacopoeia. Old formulas recommended dried frog bone powder to stop bleeding or frog skin to soothe insect bites. Although modern science may question their efficacy, these references demonstrate that Greeks regarded frogs not only as symbols but also as practical resources contributing to public health. All these layers enrich the Greek vision of the frog, intimately connected with daily life and at the same time imbued with metaphysical insight. In Greek consciousness, the frog became an emblem of circulation and renewal, of the relationship between visible and invisible. It allowed people to sense that even in the simplest sounds the cosmos speaks of the deep order of life. The frog was not merely a subject for poetry and philosophy, it also figured in countless everyday customs of the Greeks, enriching the cultural landscape we are exploring. In fishing villages along the Aegean, fishermen believed that frog calls on misty nights signaled schools of fish moving close to shore. They observed that when marshes rang with frogs, sardines and herrings also gathered in brackish waters. Passed down through generations, this tradition created a kind of seafood calendar based on nature's sounds, with the frog as a silent herald. On the fertile plains of Boeotia, many agricultural festivals included frog-catching games as part of their rituals. Children formed teams and chased frogs by torchlight, their laughter mingling with the coax chorus to become the music of the feast. Modern ethnographers note that such games were not merely entertainment but symbolized a community's active contact with the spirit of land and water, affirming harmony between people and nature at a sacred moment. In urban centers, the frog's call also inspired political caricature. Satirists compared noisy city council debates to a sleepless frog pond. Widely circulated, these cartoons offered a humorous yet sharp reminder that democracy requires reasoned order lest free speech dissolve into fruitless chaos. In this way, the frog once more transcended the animal realm to become a political emblem that helped society critique and improve itself. In medicine, physicians influenced by Hippocrates recommended observing frog habits to understand humidity and climate. They believed that the frequency of croaking could foretell weather changes and help prevent disease outbreaks. This practice shows how deeply Greeks trusted that nature, even its smallest creatures, sent signals to guide human health and lifestyle. Artists, too, found inspiration in frogs for musical experimentation. Some musicians imitated frog rhythms on the aulos or kithara, creating compositions inspired by the chorus of the marsh. Bringing natural sounds into formal art not only displayed creativity but embodied the Greek conviction that art and nature spring from the same source. Even in children's education, frogs served as playful teaching tools. Many teachers encouraged pupils to observe the frog's life cycle as a vivid lesson on growth and transformation, helping them feel that all maturation involves phases of shedding and renewal. From classroom to playground, the frog became a companion in the journey of growing up. All these examples confirm that in ancient Greek society the frog was far more than a poetic or philosophical motif. It was truly a citizen of communal life, participating in livelihood, art, and science while stimulating spiritual reflection, evidence that in Greek thought the boundary between material and spiritual, between nature and culture, was always open and dynamic. Viewed as a whole, the presence of the frog in ancient Greek consciousness reveals a distinctive approach to the natural world. Nature was not inert matter but a living network in which every sound and movement carried meaning. The frog's summer croak was therefore not merely instinctive noise but a cosmic signal, part of the infinite symphony the Greeks believed played around them. With this attitude, even a small creature could open the door to profound reflections on life's origin and destiny. From an agricultural perspective, the frog evoked the mutual support of humans and the land. Folk songs describe frogs calling rain, grain calling sun, expressing the belief that every element of nature cooperates to sustain life. Hearing frogs, people did not merely forecast weather, they felt they were taking part in a cosmic rite where humans and all beings together sang for the harvest. This is a concrete example of the Greek mindset of harmony, seeing nature as a community in which humans are only one member. In religion, the frog acted as a mediator between water deities and the human world. Small shrines to Poseidon or to spring goddesses often bore frog reliefs, emphasizing that protecting water sources was both a practical duty and a sacred one. People believed that when frogs croaked, the water gods themselves were speaking blessings or warnings depending on tone and season. Such trust brought frog calls into the heart of rain-invoking and thanksgiving rituals. For artists, the frog opened a rich field of imagery. Poets compared droplets splashing from a frog's leap to the sudden burst of creative inspiration. In rustic songs, frog calls served as natural refrains woven with instrumental music, underscoring the idea that true art always springs from nature. The frog thus became not only a subject but a companion of artistic creation. This abundance of meaning was further enriched by cultural exchanges. As Greeks expanded trade with Egypt and Mesopotamia, they encountered beliefs that viewed the frog as a symbol of fertility and rebirth. Although not adopted wholesale, these foreign stories and motifs breathed new life into Greek imagery. Archaeological finds of frog-engraved amulets, possibly influenced by neighboring civilizations, confirm their circulation in major markets. Finally, the frog served as a moral teacher about simplicity and adaptability. Philosophers advised students to learn patience from the frog, live simply, follow the seasons, sing when the time is right, and keep silent when reflection is needed. In this perspective, the frog became a model for the temperate life, one of the core ideals of Greek wisdom. All these overlapping layers, from agriculture to philosophy, from art to worship, shaped a resilient and dynamic symbol. The small, seemingly ordinary frog was entrusted by the ancient Greeks with the power to tell great stories about the cosmos, humanity, and endless renewal. Its nocturnal, coax, was not merely a marsh sound but the heartbeat of an entire worldview. To understand more deeply how ancient Greeks wove the frog into philosophical thought, we must return to the foundations of their cosmology and anthropology. From the earliest times, pre-Socratic thinkers such as Thales, Anaximander, and Heraclitus conceived of the cosmos as composed of the elements water, fire, earth, and air. In this view, the frog, living by both water and air, served as a vivid illustration of transformation among the elements. Observing the tadpoles change from gill-breathing to lung-breathing, these philosophers found concrete confirmation that life is in constant motion, always altering form to adapt. In the Pythagorean school, the harmony of the cosmos was emphasized even more. Pythagoreans regarded all things as numbers that sing, and every movement of nature as rhythm. The repetitive croak of frogs in rainy nights was heard as a syllable of the music of the spheres. Scattered testimonies indicate that Pythagorean students even trained their ears on frog calls to distinguish numerical ratios hidden in sound, linking mathematics to biology. Plato, inheriting and elevating Pythagorean intuitions, brought the frog into dialogues on the soul. In the Phaedo, he likened human beings to frogs sitting around a pond, awaiting the flight to a higher world while still held by the waters of material existence. The image expressed not only the fragility of mortal life but also hope. The soul can rise from the pond's surface to the realm of pure forms. Each time a frog emerges above the water, Plato saw a sign of the soul's upward reach. The Stoics, who valued living in harmony with nature, likewise found a lesson in frogs. They noted how the animal endures weather changes without complaint, singing in season and falling silent when conditions are harsh. Thinkers such as Epictetus took this as an example of conforming to the cosmic logos, living simply and accepting change as necessary. Some texts even counsel students to learn the frog's quietude in dry times, as a method of meditation. Aristotle, with his empirical bent, followed another path. In his Historia Animalium he described in detail the frog's development from egg to tadpole to adult, seeing in it evidence for his theory of potentiality and actuality. For him, the frog exemplified how latent form gradually moves toward complete actuality, helping explain the universal law of growth while supporting metaphysical reflection on form and matter. Beyond these major schools, many independent philosophers were fascinated by the frog's amphibious life. They took it as proof of the middle principle: every existence unfolds on the border of two or more realities. The frog belongs both to water and earth, dwells both in silence and in sudden sound, and thus symbolizes a world not of separation but of perpetual transformation. Through this double nature, the frog helped Greeks ponder the very essence of change, expressed by Heraclitus in the saying, "No one bathes twice in the same river." From Thales to Aristotle, from Pythagoras to Plato, from Stoics to solitary thinkers, the frog silently coursed through many streams of thought, taking on fresh layers of meaning in each. It could be scientific evidence, a musical symbol, an image of the soul, or a moral lesson. All this shows that Greek philosophy was never merely abstract reasoning but also the ability to read the cosmos message in the simplest forms of life. While Plato and the Stoics viewed the frog as evidence of an upward spiritual longing or of harmony with nature, other schools read different messages. Skeptics such as Pyrrho, who stressed the uncertainty of all knowledge, cited the frog as a metaphor for the ceaseless fluctuation of reality. Watching frogs surface and dive, they saw the image of a world without fixed truth, only shifting appearances. They urged humans to learn from the frog's ability to live between two environments without clinging to any absolute foundation. The Epicureans, focused on simple pleasure and freedom from fear, told stories of frogs burrowing into mud for the winter as illustrations of the art of wise withdrawal, finding tranquility amid social turmoil. For them, the frog was not a lofty metaphysical sign but a natural model of serene enjoyment and avoidance of unnecessary disturbance. Some Neo-Pythagoreans, influenced by Eastern contacts, even attributed to the frog a meaning of reincarnation. Its amphibious life represented the soul's journey through multiple worlds. The frog's croak on the first rainy nights was taken as a reminder of past lives and the return of old cycles. Though not widespread, this belief shows how flexibly the frog's image could be adapted to diverse religious and philosophical systems. Even in the most rational schools like Aristotle's, poetic reflection was not absent. Describing the frog's transformation from tadpole to adult, Aristotle not only analyzed biological mechanisms but also compared the process to human maturation, from potentiality to actuality, from capacity to fulfillment. Here the frog stood as a witness to a universal law of development and nourished wonder at life's order. Many philosophers used frog calls to explore the nature of music and language. They noted that the sound is at once regular and varied, creating an impression both simple and complex. Some treatises compared frog croaks to poetic structure, rhythm, accent, and pause. Thus the frog illustrated not only natural philosophy but also aesthetics, acting as a silent teacher of the art of words. Thinkers influenced by Orphic mystery religion also saw the frog as a symbol of soul renewal. Just as the frog sheds its skin, they said, the soul must undergo repeated sheddings to attain perfect purity. Orphic initiation rituals included songs imitating frog calls, meant to summon the powers of rebirth. This wealth of interpretations highlights a key trait of Greek philosophy. It never confined natural phenomena to a single meaning but encouraged free creation of symbols. The humble frog became a moving canvas on which each school painted its vision of the world. Whether skeptical or hedonistic, metaphysical or empirical, all found in the frog's image material for expressing their philosophical intuitions. Bringing this long journey through Greek culture and thought to a close, the frog stands out as a mirror of humanity's search for meaning in nature. From humble pawns to the theater stage, from farmers' rain rituals to the profound debates of philosophers, the frog's coax resonated through every sphere of life. Everywhere it carried messages at once simple and profound, reminders of seasonal cycles, lessons of patience and transformation, and signs of the soul's yearning for purity. This richness of meaning shows the Greek way of uniting nature and culture, observation and myth. A small natural phenomenon such as the frog's call could lead to reflections on cosmic origins, on the destiny of the soul, on the harmony of the whole. Thus the frog belonged to Aristotle's world of empirical inquiry, to Plato's metaphysical visions, to Aristophanes' comic stage, and to the rustic charms of folk magic and household amulets. Across many schools, Pythagorean, Platonic, Stoic, Skeptical, Epicurean, and Orphic, the frog became a living vocabulary for philosophy. For Pythagoreans it was a note in the cosmic harmony, for Plato a soul waiting to take flight, for the Stoics a teacher of living in accord with nature, for the skeptics an emblem of uncertainty, for the Epicureans a model of serene simplicity. This diversity made the frog's call a shared background music for many philosophical conversations. From a broader cultural perspective, the frog also linked Greece to neighboring civilizations. Echoes from Egypt's goddess Hecate or from Mesopotamian rain deities widened Greek imagination, giving the frog both local character and a Mediterranean dimension. Through these exchanges the frog became a transcultural image, binding peoples around the sea through shared experiences of water, fertility, and renewal. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of the frog is its power to reconcile opposites, earth and water, silence and sound, reality and myth, life and death. It helped the Greeks perceive that the world is not divided but in constant motion between poles, and that life endures precisely in this movement. Even today, reading these texts and stories, we may feel the frog still inviting us to listen to the grand rhythm of the cosmos. In closing, we may say that the humble frog became a philosophical character in human history. It proves humanity's capacity to find deep meaning in the most familiar things, transforming a marsh sound into a symbol of life, death, and the hope of rebirth. This is the lasting message that ancient Greece offers, to listen carefully to nature's voice, for within it lies the symphony of the universe and of our own souls. My sincere thanks to all readers and viewers who have patiently followed and listened throughout this long journey into the image of the frog in ancient Greek culture. Every story, quotation, and reflection presented here is only a small doorway into the vast treasury of that civilization. I hope what we have explored together not only provides knowledge but also sparks inspiration for further discovery. See you again in upcoming videos with fresh findings as we continue our fascinating voyage through the other mysteries of ancient Greece.